All right, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us. It's 5 o'clock, so we'll make a start. I'd like to start by introducing our panelists today. First of all, warm welcome to Astrid Laubser, who is from Mirfin Valuation Services. Mirfin are specialists in the 10-year maintenance plans, as well as insurance replacement valuations, and they have a very interesting platform, which Astrid will demonstrate for loading and tracking and updating 10-year maintenance plans, which I think you'll find of interest. We then have Shaun Swindon, who's from Trafalgar. Shaun is a senior operations and facility manager. He's got extensive experience with estate management, training new estate management staff and caretakers, and he's got a lot of excellent experience with maintenance and maintenance operations management. And I think we'll have some interesting comments about maintenance best practices. And then joining me again, Karien and Trafalgar's property management consultant operating nationally based in Cape Town. And as usual, Karien will give us an overview of the relevant legislative framework and parameters pertaining to maintenance in sectional title schemes. So welcome. We appreciate your time. We will respect your time, and we'll aim to end promptly at 6 p.m. or shortly before. Just to note that at the end, there will be a pop-up survey. We'd appreciate just short comments on whether you found the topic useful and helpful, any suggestions to improve the webinar presentations, and also any topics you'd like us to cover. A reminder that the webinar is being recorded, and also that recordings are then uploaded on the training website we have, which is training.trafalgar.poso, and Karien will mention a few pointers about what training is available on that site. At the end, we will also introduce the next webinar topic we have lined up for June. So that topic and the date will be shown. We also give contact details at the end. So any questions that we aren't able to answer because of time or otherwise, we will gladly come back to you, or you're welcome to use the contact details that will be provided and correspond with any of us afterwards. We'd be very glad to provide feedback to you. Also, if you would like a copy of the slides, and the webinar recording, please just enter your email address in the Q&A. Just say something brief like please send slides and Q&A if you would like it, and we'll gladly extract that from the Q&A download, and we'll then circulate that either tomorrow or Monday when the webinar recording has been uploaded and is available for that. So I think that's the introduction. So Karien, may I hand over to you to take us through the next two topics. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew, and welcome everybody. So just to give you an overview, as Andrew mentioned, we've got on our website, we've got a training page. You'll see the link there at the top of the screen. And on this training page, we've got different materials available, courses available. We have a sectional title trustee training online course, an introduction to homeowners association course, a sectional title caretaker course, a basic terminology course. Just those courses are open to anybody to attend. You do it online in your own time, and it is free of charge. You can just enroll on our website. And then we also have other resources, just highlighting some of them. We've got a guide to trustees, we've got a guide to owners. We also have a section with a question of the week, just basically relevant topics that are quickly answered. So it's like a question answer type scenario. It's sorted in different categories. And then also, as Andrew said, we've got all the webinar recordings available, and that is all on our training page. Then going on to today's topic. So we're looking at maintenance, we're looking at the legalities surrounding maintenance, and that's where I come in. So if you look at the screen, you'll see that that's a basic scenario of a basic unit, and showing the split between what is section and what is common property, because it is important to know this because of what I will show you on our next slide. So that is just a basic scenario. What is section, what is common property? The Act says the median line running through the wall, ceilings and floor divides between section and common property. Important that we know that, because the Act and there's the different quote, or the relevant quote from the Act that says the body corporate is responsible for the common property and the owner is responsible for the section. And there you can see the quote from the Act on that as well. If we have to then determine what is the status of the area, because it's easy to say body corporate responsible for common property, owner responsible for section, but it's not that easy always to determine what it is. For instance, if you have a balcony, is it common property? Is it part of the section? Is it an exclusive use area? If there's a problem in a garden, is it common property? Is it an exclusive use area? So that will need to be determined. And the way to do that will be to look at the sectional plans, the approved management rules of that specific scheme, and the approved conduct rules of that specific scheme. That is how you will determine if a relevant area that has damage that need to be maintained is common property or a section or an exclusive use area, and thereby you can then determine who's responsible for maintenance to that area. Then we go on to the legal requirement with regards to all sectional title schemes. The Act says in the prescribed management rules that all schemes must have a 10-year maintenance plan. It's set out there, and Astrid will discuss this in way more detail, but there is just the quote from the prescribed management rule that says it's a legal requirement. All sectional title schemes must have a 10-year maintenance plan. This does not apply. We're not talking about homeowners associations today, but just to mention, this does not apply to homeowners associations, but it could be a good thing to maybe write it into your homeowners association, MOI, or constitution to also have something like this in place. But the legal requirement is only for sectional title schemes. And that's it from my side. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Karien. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for having me here. I will be focusing on the 10-year maintenance plans. And if Karien, if you could just move on to the benefits of a 10-year maintenance plan. So, as Karien said, it is a legal requirement to have a 10-year maintenance plan in place, and it will also be part of your annual audit. So, and if your body corporate becomes audited, then it should form part of that audit and it should be in place. So, the benefits of a 10-year maintenance plan are actually quite obvious because as soon as you start and you get an overview of items which need to be maintained, regularly maintained or replaced based on their lifespan or the maintenance cycle or just experience. You might experience different maintenance issues in different areas of the country. But as soon as you've put that together and as soon as you are aware what's going on in your complex, you can actually start planning, and you can start planning to fund those maintenance projects, and then in form of your reserve fund levies. And this obviously then allows for, as soon as you know what you need to do, and as soon as you know what it will cost you, you start actually charging levies and calculating your levies. So this already gives you a better outlook and a more financial, better financial situation, because by creating a 10-year maintenance plan and knowing the expenditure, you actually just avoid unwelcome surprises like heavy levy increases or a special levy, and just having unhappy residents and owners because of that. So, but once you have an overview, and once you start or you keep on maintaining your complex, you will actually also reduce cost, because the longer you push a certain maintenance item into the future and you don't attend to it, the more costly it becomes. And that's really something you want to avoid. And just a good example for that is, an example would be the waterproofing of a roof. So if you don't attend to a proper waterproofing in the prescribed manner and maintenance cycle, you might have a major issue after a few years with leaking roofs, and then with complaining residents And it just becomes more and more expensive because the woodwork underneath starts to rot, and there's water ingress in units, and this is really something you want to avoid. So therefore, it makes sense to do regular maintenance and extend the lifespan of a roof, because it's not only about the waterproofing, it's also about extending the lifespan to maybe a few more years in order to avoid like really high costing. Then if we can just move on to the next sheet, Karien. So when it comes to everybody corporate basically has the same challenges, and the challenges we are running into basically on a daily basis is mismanagement and pure carelessness. But this is not always intended. It's most of the time it's actually a result of the lack of knowledge. And then because trustees are not aware, the wrong people get appointed, or maybe there isn't even somebody that would like to do and to oversee the maintenance work, and then there's maybe not even a caretaker on site. This then turns into poor financial planning and insufficient funds, because nobody really knows what's going on. There might even be the situation where residents can't afford their levies, or they are just unwilling to pay higher levies, or even maybe special levies, because the scheme hasn't been run properly and not maintained properly. And then this in turn then creates major issues. It creates an unpleasant atmosphere, and it becomes more and more difficult to actually attend to maintenance and to decide on what needs to be done first. So, and like it is shown here on that sheet, there's a lot of unpleasant situations like mismanagement, insufficient funds, levies that might not be paid. And then at the same time, it is so important to actually realize that you have to maintain your structures and the common property, because it is a life investment for most of the owners, and you really should treat it like that. And it should increase in value and not shrink in value. So besides that the complex is well maintained and looks nice, it is also has a massive impact on your life investment and on maybe even your rent or the value of your scheme or your individual unit. Can we just move on? The next sheet. So the big question is always, our clients call us and say, how do we do this? I mean, we found you on the internet, but what must we do next? So we always say, engage with a professional service provider. So if you landed up with Mirfin, you're quite well off, but there are obviously quite a few other service providers out there with a lot of experience. But if you don't know where to go, it's always good to ask your managing agents for assistance. They usually have a lot of knowledge and a lot of contacts, and they will direct you into a certain direction where they feel confident. So it's always a good thing to get back to your managing agents if you need some help. Then what we always recommend is obtain sample reports. Ask your service provider, how does your 10-year maintenance plan look like? What's included? And are there pictures included? Does it consider, does it actually come with a reserve fund forecast? Does it calculate my minimum contribution to the reserve fund? Is it actually compliant? Is it legally compliant? So, and the best way to find this out is to obtain sample reports and then just ask a lot of questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions. It is something you have to do. It is something you need to pay money for. So every service provider should be more than willing to actually give you a lot of information and answer all your questions. We can move on, please, to the next sheet. So I don't think I have to go into much detail here, because this is something that Karien also mentioned, it is basically what is legally required. It should include the major capital items, the present condition, the year of the necessary maintenance and repair. So this is easily done and important. But what the Act doesn't say, or the law doesn't prescribe, is that the admin fund items, like your daily maintenance, your nitty-gritties, like your leaking tap and your light bulbs and your firefighting equipment service, that it should be done annually, they don't belong into the 10-year maintenance plan. The 10-year maintenance plan is actually for the big ticket items, like the waterproofing, the roofing, your paving, your redecoration projects. If your windows have to be, if you've got steel windows or timber windows, they need to be painted and maintained. If you live in a plaster and painted scheme, then that needs to be done every 5 to 7 years, depending on what material has been used. And it is important to do that within the life cycle, because if you don't do it and you experience water ingress, the cost will increase drastically if you just push it out for another year and another year and another year, because then you're not only dealing with maybe here and there a little bit of flaking paint, then you might in the end actually deal with proper damp issues and complaining owners, and then it becomes really, really costly. So rather plan for it, get your quotations in, and update your 10-year maintenance plan. Karien, can you move to the next one, please? So the updates are actually so important. It doesn't help if you have a 10-year maintenance plan and then you don't look at it for the next 3 years. So you should always and regularly make adjustments and update the plan. So if you're looking at a redecoration project that needs to be done maybe in 2 years, then you can get a quote in today and ask the contractor, what would it cost? And then you can factor in inflation for the next 10 years, for the next 2 years until the project needs to be done. And then you already have a good idea of how much money you need to put aside and how much money you need to make available. So what I'm saying is it doesn't help if you have a 10-year maintenance plan done today, but you only do the next redecoration project in 5 years, and you get a quote in, and until then nobody looks at it anymore. So you really, it's a living document. You really need to take care of your 10-year maintenance plan and update it so that you can actually stay ahead and start saving for the big ticket items. So can we move on, please? The next one. So, and in order to do that, I will always recommend not only to go with what the service provider has recommended. So if we now go out and we do a 10-year maintenance plan and we recommend a certain amount for a certain maintenance item, we always recommend to get actually a professional service provider out who is specialized in that specific field. May it be paving or painting or waterproofing or roofing itself, or maybe somebody who replaces and repairs elevators. Get the real life figures and get market related quotes and put them in the 10-year maintenance plan. And then, because these items, the big ticket items, they account for 70 to 80% of all your 10-year maintenance planning and the costs. So the smaller items like the electric fence and the walls and the drainage, they only make up for 20 to 30% usually, but you really have to get the correct figures for your really big ticket items. And then as soon as you have them, you just amend your 10-year maintenance plan. The problem there is that most of the service providers who give you a 10-year maintenance plan, they give you static PDF documents, and you can't really work on them and you can't change them. And they will ask you for every little bit that they need to change, you will have to pay money, which is kind of unfair. So, but I will get to that and I'll show you an easier way which is actually more a time efficient and also more cost efficient. Can we please move to the next? Yes.
Do you mind if I interrupt you? I think this is an important point. I think a lot of trustees and owners get held up by exactly what you're saying, how to estimate what costs to include.
Yes.
Now, my personal view is that, a maintenance plan is better done than perfect. And a lot of people are waiting for perfection, and perfection, is the concern. Is it an accurate quote? Is it a quote from a specialist? Is it really the right price? And, that uncertainty creates a delay. And most definitely, it's better to have a desktop estimate based on the likes of your services and others who will apply standard rates multiplied by the area to come up with a reasonable desktop estimate for the purposes of the maintenance plan to be agreed at the AGM. Now, in every case, the recommendation is before the project starts, naturally the trustees would want 3 quotes. But it doesn't make sense to get a quote today for a project that's scheduled for next year or 5 years or 10 years. That makes no sense. We also need to, we have to respect the time and the capacity of contractors as well. There's no need, it's not fair on them to call them out for a quote for a project that may not be done or that may be done in the future, because it's actually wasting their time. And that's where they start charging for quotes, which trustees object to. So definitely for the purposes of the plan, a reasonable desktop estimate, which an experienced maintenance inspector can do, would suffice, and comfort in the knowledge that, generally then detailed quotes, comparable quotes, 3 quotes would be undertaken before the project is planned. And, that would need to be based on a written scope, and a project manager can be involved from the outset. So I think those are important clarifications of, how the maintenance plan can be developed, but there's always a check down the line based on getting quotes from specialists, also factoring in, factors like deposits, like guarantees, like project manager costs, etc., which should be taken into account. So, please do bear that in mind. And, it's too often I see that, trustees do not want to commit to a maintenance plan because they're worried that the estimates aren't accurate enough. But it's better that it's done in that way, because there is the double check, and it's most practical and most achievable to do it like that. Thank you, Astrid. Please carry on.
Yes, I also would like to add to that, because it is a 10-year maintenance plan is never 100% accurate. It is merely for saving up capital to be able to afford a certain maintenance item once it's due. So, and for us as a service provider, it's also incredibly difficult, because our figures will obviously be questioned. But the problem there is, if you ask 3 different service providers to maybe a quote for a waterproofing project, then you will definitely get 3 different quotes, even though the specs are it's the same spec. So that it is very difficult for us to be spot on. And as Andrew said, quotes need to be obtained closer to the time, and then the spec needs to go out. So I totally agree, and that's actually what we're telling our clients as well. So if we then could move on to the maintenance schedule, and from here, I would actually like to take you to our dashboards, and I will share my screen, and then take you to my dashboard and show you how the 10-year maintenance plan can be adjusted. Let me just go here. So I was going
to say, while you're getting there, Astrid, maybe just you can bring it up. I'll just introduce it. So Mirfin have got a platform, an online platform, where maintenance plans are uploaded after they've done the inspection and they've calculated the desktop quotes. And Astrid will show you what that looks like. And then very importantly, how it can be updated both annually when it's supposed to be updated and presented at the AGM, or as a quote might come through for a project that is being planned in the near future. So that is the convenience which the Mirfin online platform offers. And I think there's some other interesting features which Astrid will show as well. So Astrid, I don't see it shared yet. I don't know if you have shared the platform.
Yes.
It's not visible on my side yet. Okay, it's coming up. There we go.
Is it? Yeah. Okay, great. So yeah, like Andrew said, this is the Mirfin specific software. We are actually the only service provider on the market that allows our clients to basically log onto our system after we have done the 10-year maintenance plan. The 10-year maintenance plan should always be based on a physical inspection. So you can't do a 10-year maintenance plan without having been on site. So, and once our inspectors have been out on site and they have inspected the property, they will start compiling the report. So what they do, they will work along all the capital assets, and then they will fill them in here. So then the law prescribes that they have to be asset categories and asset conditions and the maintenance required, and then the lifespan and the next year of maintenance. So you can see that quite well here. So for example, we've got the exterior painting, and then there's a comment that says, okay, that it was last painted in 2015. So usually the maintenance cycle is between 7 and 8 years, which fits quite perfectly. And then the cost as per today would be 350,000, and the next year of maintenance would be 2024. And then we repeat this in 7 years' time. So now we're looking at the estimated maintenance today as per the inspection date. But now we see that in 2024, this amount is actually higher. So what the system does for you, it actually calculates inflation. It adds annually a certain amount of inflation, which you can determine. At this point, everybody works along between 8 and 10% inflation or escalation annually for building costs. So this is why this amount here is higher. So, and if we would move this now maybe to 2025, because we maybe can't really afford it in 2024, you see that this amount is even higher. So this also refers to what I said earlier. Don't prolong it, don't push it out too far, because it will become more and more expensive because the prices are increasing every year. So another nice feature of our system is that if you decide to start your project in 2024, but you know already that you can't really afford the entire scheme to be repainted, and you want to do it in 2 phases, you can just split the cost, and then it will show in the next year. So this is, yeah. So it will show in the next year, and then you see, because the life cycle or the maintenance cycle is 7 years, the escalated cost will show up in year 9 and 10, and you know exactly what you're looking at and what amounts you have to plan with. So the system allows you to basically swap and change everything. You can, based on your quotations, you can change amounts here. You can say, okay, the latest quotation says it's 500,000. The waterproofing became maybe a little bit cheaper. It's 80,000 Rand. So, and then the system recalculates everything instantly. So you don't have to go back to your service provider and say, oh, can you please adjust my PDF document and send it back to me? What you do in our case, you get your 10-year maintenance plan. You maybe have somebody who's dedicated to do that, or you have an on-site manager. You log in, you do the necessary amendments, and you get your recalculated 10-year maintenance plan, and you can keep it up to date. You can take items out of the report that you don't feel are necessary anymore, or you can even add items where you can say somebody drove into our gate and we need to buy a new gate. And this gate it cost us 30,000 Rand, but it will hopefully still last 2 years because we can't do it now and then we don't do it again for 25 years. So it is quick. And this is really a nice feature for everyone who wants to be on top of the game and who wants to save money and who wants to manage the maintenance of a scheme properly. On top of that, you can put in the financial parameters. So this is actually the inflation that you just saw here. So we're working from 6.15%. This is on the percentage. The cost gets escalated every year. So this is based on this amount here. And then the system takes into consideration the interest rate that you're earning on your reserve fund account. Then you just fill in the financials that you require in order to actually calculate the minimum contribution to the reserve fund, which is obviously what you have to spend. You're not necessarily have to only do this. So, but you can also go higher if you can afford it. But the system here, based on these figures here, the system here will tell you what is the minimum contribution that you should budget towards the reserve fund. And it will actually also tell you why, because the ratio between the opening balance of the reserve fund and the total contributions at the end of the previous financial year are like this. So, and then it automatically calculates it for you. So there are regulations 2, A, B, and C, and everybody's always confused with it. So please don't be concerned. Just put your figures in. The system calculates it for you, and it automatically pulls it over. Oh, that wasn't the plan. It pulls it into your cash flow forecast. Okay, I'll just move on here. So it pulls it into your cash flow forecast and then tells you, okay, the annual contribution that we have calculated, or that the system has calculated, is regulation 2C, is based on regulation 2C. And now it actually pulls through to your reserve fund cash flow forecast. So it shows you exactly with how much you start your financial year, what your minimum contribution should be, how much interest you're earning, if you have maybe a special levy or not, what is your estimated expenditure, and it gives you the closing balance. And so it goes up and down and up and down and up and down. And it will also, if your expenditure exceeds your income, it will actually show you and point out to you if you're falling short in a certain year. So it will really alarm you so that you can start acting by maybe increasing the levies a bit, or maybe move maintenance items around within reason. So like I just showed you earlier, you might just do a certain maintenance within 2 phases, if that eases it a little bit, or you might even get financial aid in. So there are several options to tackle a shortfall. And the nice thing about this system is that you can actually play around with it, and that you can have different scenarios and just put the figures in, see what it comes up with, what are our possibilities, and then just play around with it, because you can't go wrong. You can't break it. If you don't like what you've done, you just reset it to what you've started with, and then you make a decision. You take this plan or even the system to your AGM, and then you make a decision there. So it's really user friendly. It's easy to read, and once you've put all your data on, you can print your 10-year maintenance plan. And this 10-year maintenance plan that you're looking at now is actually completely compliant. So it entails everything that the law prescribes, and it gives you a lot of extra information. So it starts off with the 10-year maintenance plan and the reserve fund planning. It gives you the life cycle cost analysis. So this is basically everything that the law prescribes, what has to be on in the 10-year maintenance plan. It gives you a proper overview of the next 10 years. It shows you exactly what expenditure are you looking at for the next 10 years. And then it gives you your reserve fund planning. It explains to you why you need to contribute this amount. And then again, it gives you a proper reserve fund cash flow forecast from this year, from the current financial year to 10 years down the line, and you will always know where you stand. So then it also allows you to the admin fund, but I will just jump this. Then it gives you a little bit of a cash flow projections and a little bit of graphs. And then the most important thing, and that's actually the page everybody wants to look at, is how much levies does everybody have to pay. So, and the plan should, every 10-year maintenance plan actually should come with a levy schedule. It should show you how much an individual section owner has to contribute per month for the reserve fund levy. And it shows you exactly, so this is obviously based on the floor area of every section. It shows you exactly for how much every section owner has to contribute within the next financial year. It also allows you to do your admin fund and to calculate your admin fund on here. If you want to do that, that's just an extra feature which is for free, and it calculates your CSAS levies on top of it. So then you just look at the total amount of your levies per section, which is quite handy. But most of our clients actually use the system purely for the 10-year maintenance plan. So if we go further down, then every maintenance plan should also come with photographs, which is quite obvious here. And then it comes with a little bit of legislation and information. Yeah, that's actually how the 10-year maintenance plan looks like. I'm not quite sure why my dashboard left us. Oh, here we are again. That's wonderful. So I just quickly want to show you. So let's just say we're going here. It doesn't work. I don't know why it does that. So this is Murphy. I think we can leave it there and just go back to the slides if that's possible.
I think we're going to need to leave it there, Astrid. So I think thank you very much indeed. So I think you've given a very good overview of, first of all, how is a 10-year maintenance plan compiled? How is it changed and updated annually? What are the components of a maintenance plan and a maintenance report? And then, that would be approved at the AGM. Maybe just a last word in terms of project managing it, because as you said, there's no point in having a maintenance plan, apart from the legal compliance if it's not going to be used. So the way we project manage those is that after the 10-year plan is approved at an AGM, we will then load the approved projects for the next year in a maintenance workflow. We'll log them. And then a month before, we will then check for funds. We'll approach the trustees to see if they are comfortable to go ahead as planned and as scheduled. For example, the project could be delayed if there's no funds available or there are weather issues or whatever. And then we go through scoping the project, organizing quotes, and then positioning the trustees to make an informed choice on a preferred service provider. So that's the extrapolation, the extension of an approved maintenance plan. And that obviously becomes an annual cycle as it goes year to year and project to project. All right, so thanks very much. I think we'll stop sharing on your side if we may then, Astrid, and we'll move on to Shaun, who's going to talk about, facility management and maintenance recommendations for trustees to be aware of and best practices in that regard. So Shaun, once Astrid stops sharing, then over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew, and good evening to everybody who's listening. I think while we're moving, I see Karien has already done it, but we're going to segue over into the more ad hoc maintenance. So Astrid's presentation was fabulous, and just a reminder to all the owners out there that are listening that there is a distinct difference between planned maintenance and ad hoc maintenance. So your planned maintenance is something you can forecast, but something which I'm going to be touching on, which is a lot less glamorous, is the ad hoc maintenance, which is day-to-day maintaining of your complexes. So just to run through, the most important is your compliance certificates. These compliance certificates are important because council governs them and does regular inspections on them. Not as regular as all of us would hope, but they do it from time to time. Starting with fire equipment, an annual inspection and service is required. You would check the service date on your stickers of the equipment. This is generally maintained by Trafalgar's maintenance department, and we will prompt the trustees as and when it's required. Firefighting equipment registers should be kept on file on site, both at the complex and, of course, with the managing agent. That's how we would keep track of how many extinguishers, how many hydrants, and everything that would be, so that we can agree on a scope with the firefighting company who's going to be doing the servicing. A major service is required every 5 years, so that might draw additional costs. That is something that you can plan for, and you could get a rough estimate from your portfolio management team in terms of how much that could be and how much you should start budgeting for now. The insurance should then eventually be provided with the annual compliance certificate and firefighting register. This will assist in keeping track of your rates that you're being charged and then escalations, and that as if your equipment is up to date, obviously you won't attract any negative attention. Moving on swiftly to your electric fence, an electrical COC should be obtained at installation and after any major changes or repairs. So a couple of years ago, there was a change in the Act where if you do get a new fence or a major upgrade on your old fence, you do need to get a COC on that fence. This is in terms of a lot of legislation in terms of signage, fences being installed next to each other. It's all health and safety reliant, but your portfolio manager can assist you more with that information if you want to know more, or your security service provider that maintains the fence. The COC is required for the transfer of sectional title units. When an owner buys a new unit, they could request that certificate from the transferring attorneys, and it is something that the body corporate would have to provide to the new buyer. So having that in your back pocket ready to go would be a good idea. It's good practice to have a valid COC on file. I'm not going to lie, for those reasons given. If you have lifts on your site, and an Annexure B is something that you would have to have in your lift room on file and ready for the inspectors to see. This inspection is done every 2 years, and it's pretty much done by an independent contractor who will be summoned to site by, say, a Schindler's or a Kone or one of those guys. They would give an unbiased opinion to the current contracted lift provider, and then a quote would be generated by your SLA service provider, and the remedial work would be done. That would then get the lift compliant in terms of what is required by the Department of Labor and Health. After inspection, you have 60 days in which to address any of these issues on the Annexure B. So there's a bit of a breathing off period. All inspection items must be addressed before a clean Annexure B certificate can be obtained. I had a situation on a site where I came on site to manage it, and the Annexure B inspection was done 2 years ago. However, there were criteria on the Annexure B report which said this needs to be done, that needs to be done, and that was never done. So there are now complications on that Annexure B after the department were on site. Again, this is a legal requirement. Moving on to swimming pools. These are generally quite serious health and safety risks. I'm sure you've seen on news and media in terms of when a kid does unfortunately lose their life or somebody gets injured around the pool. It does draw a lot of media attention. And the last thing that Trafalgar wants for any of its clients is to attract that negative publicity. So what we do, and I'm sure a lot of you are aware, we do the free annual site inspections, which is a free value add from Trafalgar in terms of checking all risk assessments on the site over and above many others. One of the things we check vigilantly for is the swimming pools. So the bylaws prescribe a couple of different safety equipment around the pool. For instance, a disclaimer sign. The fence around the pool has to be at least 1.2 meters high. The gate needs to have a double latch catch and spring. And there is mention of a pool net when the pool is not being used or is not fenced off correctly. The pool net obviously has to support a certain amount of weight. There is mention also of a life buoy of sorts, but it can be understood that you have a life-saving equipment. So for instance, a pool brush where you clean with the long pole, that could be seen as a life-saving piece of equipment, and that could stand as that. So what I tell my clients is rather be safe than sorry. Don't take chances around the pool. Karien, if we can just move on to the next slide.
Shaun, do you mind if I just emphasize that slide? So maybe just go back one, Karien. So, I'm going to just say it in stronger terms, these are absolutely essential maintenance priorities. It's up to every trustee or executive managing agent to make sure that these items are covered, the compliance certificates are in place, that they're up to date. And there most definitely are legal risks and health and safety risks if this is not in place. And most definitely the insurers will be looking for updated firefighting certification for the COCs, as well as the lift annexure Bs. And if those are not in place, there's a very high risk of claims being repudiated if there are damages arising from fire or from any lift-related issues. So it's an absolutely essential, expectation for trustees and a top priority governance requirement that these bases are covered. We come up with challenges where certain buildings can't afford, for example, to attend to the lift annexure items, even for fire equipment sometimes. And, in those cases, the contractors very often will negotiate terms, they will negotiate payment plans, they will spread the costs to make it more affordable and achievable. And as a last resort, a loan might be required. But really, it would be foolhardy to take gaps and shortcuts here, because there are significant risks and potential loss of life relating to these particular areas. So Shaun, I just wanted to make that very strong point there. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. So moving on from, as Andrew said, very important items, well, non-negotiable items. You have the pretty much preventative maintenance is what I call it, or a lot of people call it. So we start off, just as an example, the gutters on your roofs. A lot of them are apartment blocks, so access is not very easy to attain. However, if they are attainable, I would suggest a monthly clean of the gutters, or getting up there, getting your hands in there, or whoever's working on site, get those gutters cleaned out especially just before the rainy season or during the rainy season, to avoid blockages from vegetation that's caught up there, any dust sediments, those kind of things. Obviously, the water backlog is going to cause the damp to hang around. It's not going to run away as it was designed, and it's going to cause corrosion, which will eventually lead to damage to the gutters. And then the overflow from those damaged gutters is then going to lead to damage to barge boards, those kind of things. So, preventative maintenance, I think, long and the short of it during this slide, is going to save you money in terms of when you're getting around to Astrid's department, where it's a 10-year maintenance plan. So you're going to save money just by spending a little bit during the years. So drains, so stormwater drains, those kind of things, again, clear weekly if you've got the time. Obviously these timelines that I'm giving you are luxurious, to say the least. However, at least twice a year, three times a year, get somebody in your stormwater drains, and your gutters, get them cleared out to stop localized flooding and possibly blockages, which will have to get a plumber in to unblock drains. Municipal meters on your pavements. I've done meter reading myself, so I would suggest clearing those meter reading boxes. It just puts the meter readers from council in a better mood, and you probably get better service or more accurate readings. I've been into meter boxes where you literally just have the numbers showing. There's just built up sand over the years from water running in there and the sediment collecting. Daily common property inspections, the next one that I'd like to talk about. Let somebody take a walk around daily. These sites are like living entities. Things change every day. I mean, I've been to a site, I go to a site maybe once a week on one of my client sites, and there's always something new that you're picking up. Even though you've inspected this one area 20 times, there's always something there that can catch your attention. And also a new set of eyes is always a good thing. So if there's a group of trustees, maybe have one guy who's doing maintenance and then have somebody else just to walk through and do an audit of what they've picked up. But more eyes, it eases the work. More hands eases the work, sorry. Lighting, I have a bugbear of clean areas, so get caretakers to clean light covers monthly if need be. Open them up, address fused light bulbs promptly. Again, open them up, take out the old insects, take out the dust that's collected over a couple of months or years. It just looks, for me, tatty at the end of the day when you have this buildup of debris, and it improves the aesthetics of the building considerably, never mind the lighting. Leaking taps, take a walk around, let your guys on site replace washers promptly. And then again, also just remember, no firefighting equipment should be used unless for a fire-related emergency. Remember that the fire equipment, definitely the hose reels, are connected not through your water meter, so it's actually not legal to use that water other than for firefighting. But again, it also reduces pressure in the system, which will be have a negative impact if there is a fire and you need to use it. Refuse removal. A lot of the time, we need to check for effective removal and cleaning of bins. When I say that, there's a lot of buildings that I go to where owners or tenants are just residents are just leaving their refuse lying in the corridors. Caretakers do the best they can. However, it does build up the muck and grime. So regular cleaning and also regular cleaning of the bins is imperative, not only for the smell, the health, and all of those kind of reasons, but just generally the cleanliness of the site is important. Weeds around the site it's not going to affect anything structurally or anything in those regards, but definitely from an aesthetic point of view, you have a guest or you have a new buyer that's coming into the complex to purchase your unit specifically, and you want to get the good price for your unit. They come in there and you have weeds growing through the paving. It's unsightly, and I generally ask my guys that are on site, please, if you see the weeds, rather remove them immediately, manually. And if you have the luxury of getting a weed killer, then yes, spray definitely. However, during the rainy seasons, spraying is less effective. The poison gets washed away, and a weed killer, I'm sure you all know, is hellish expensive. So manual removal, old school manual removal works just as well. There's more, it's more laborious, but that's your choice and which suits your site specifically. Bird droppings, all of us in the built-up city areas, we have the issue with the feral pigeon, which come from the mountains up in Europe somewhere, and their poop or their defecations. So a buildup of these defecations doesn't directly affect human beings. However, it's unsightly. When it gets wet, it smells in enclosed areas where there's no wind flow. However, the problem comes in, there's a specific insect, I wouldn't use the word parasite, that's the wrong word, but there's a specific bug that hangs around these defecations, and it causes like a bronchial asthmatic reaction in some people. So cleaning of the defecations is a priority on those sites that are affected by it, and they should definitely not collect over months. Maybe a couple of weeks, yes, but they should be cleared regularly. Again, back to electric fences, however, not with the COCs, but clearing of vegetation from electric fences and checking on the bobbins on a regular basis, at least once a month. Now, go back to vegetation, just to cut away tree branches, any creepers, a lot of weeds that grow in Johannesburg. When the soil is unsettled, the weeds take root and they start growing up the wall. These things don't grow very fast, so you can manage this, and your on-site people can take a walk around the site again, like I said, on a daily basis or a weekly basis, and just throw an eye onto the perimeter wall. Getting those things off of the walls is a good idea generally. Andrew, apologies, you seem to be running a bit late, so I'm going to try and speed this up a bit.
Yeah, sure. Can I just add a point or two before you go on? So, yeah, we've got 10 minutes left. These are all important focus areas. The big challenge is who's going to check these? How are they going to be serviced? And, that's an important job for the trustees to decide once a year or periodically is, who is going to take responsibility. If there's a caretaker, that's great. At least there's somebody who's got time and capacity and responsible for these checks and the servicing. If not, it may need to be a trustee. Smaller buildings might need to consider a part-time caretaker. There might be an employee of the complex, of the body corporate, that could do this. But ultimately, it's recommended that there is one trustee who holds the maintenance portfolio, who would then take accountability for these maintenance areas being covered, who would see that the common property is inspected daily or at least weekly, and that these items are attended to. Many buildings don't get to this. We understand trustees are generally working. They generally have limited time. It is a volunteer, unpaid role. So it is a big ask that these are all covered regularly. and it does become a challenge, especially in smaller buildings with smaller levy income budgets. And therein lies the challenges. How is this made possible? Because if these checks aren't done over time, the damages compound, and ultimately it will affect the aesthetics, it will affect the lifestyles, it will affect the values of properties, and that's really what we're trying to avoid. So it's important just to have a proactive approach of what is the operational approach that is going to make all of this practical and feasible, who's going to make sure it happens, and making sure that consistency is applied. Because yes, in the first month or year, maybe these items won't cause any headaches or difficulties, but it will compound, and at some point maintenance costs will escalate and become a serious issue. And Shaun gave examples of what can happen with block drains and gutters over time. So Shaun, let's move swiftly on, but that's an important checklist, and the takeaway is for trustees to make sure that it's happening in some practical way.
You can stay on the slide, Karien. I just wanted to go over the high maintenance systems which require frequent checks. That's fine. So your CCTV systems, security reasons, irrigation systems, you don't water your garden, you're going to have to do it manually. It's going to take time. Security gates, obviously access control security, intercoms, letting your security officer handle access, exit out of your site, that could be a problem. DSTV aerials, management of cabling and stuff. I've seen many sites where it's an absolute shambles. If you let it get out of hand, it's a disaster. Bathroom facilities for building staff, security staff, all of those kind of things. Check that facilities are clean and adequately stocked. Adequately stocked in terms of toilet paper. If they don't have toilet paper supplied, I can tell you now they're going to use other materials. It's going to result in blockages and costs for you guys to unblock. And then finally, check on your disclaimer boards, please. Upon entry, you should have an indemnity board listing, disclaiming everything and saying to people, it's on you. Karien, if you move on to the next one. Just on what Andrew mentioned, in front of you is a list of just a basic work schedule, a time roster for staff. If you would like this list, I'll give you a template for free, no problem. Just reach out to me on email. It basically breaks down the hours of where your staff is. It obviously takes a bit of management, but in terms, if you have an issue with the problem with the caretaker or somebody like that that's not performing on site, you can manage them better with this roster so that you know where they are at whatever time, and they also understand what their role is and how to do it. Karien, you can move on. So this is logging just to understand the difference between emergency and routine maintenance. Obviously, emergency maintenance is block drains, excessive water leaks, security-related issues like the gate motor is broken, electric fence. These are items which generally Trafalgar, we wouldn't have to go out and get quotations for because it's an emergency, and we generally just get a go ahead by the trustees, and we proceed. Sometimes we have an EMA on site, or we have a portfolio manager who has a relationship with their client, and they get pre-approval, so up to a certain amount of money. Then you get routine jobs, which obviously would then follow the proper quote way. So Trafalgar normally offers to get I think it's 2 quotes. However, 3 can be requested. So the routine quotation request takes 3 to 7 working days. The urgent quotation request takes 3 to 4 working days. The emergency quotation request is 2 to 3 days. And obviously, we've got a whole department that's running separately to the portfolio management team. However, they do work hand in hand. And recently, I've become more involved with that process. So the scope is generally much more detailed. Occasionally, telephone quotes from the service providers will be an optional extra. However, obviously, those are not as accurate as we all hope most of the time, because it's better that the contractor does go to the site and then inspect and quote. Ideally, it would be best if a trustee actually scoped the project and said X, Y, and Z needs to be done, and then the quote is according to that scope. However, I've found a lot of the time the contractors go to site and they dictate to us what the scope should be, and they quote, generally there and thereabouts. But then we have the situation when there's 2 or 3 quotes which are all different and some varying. So then there's that problem. The managing of the turnaround time expectations from the outset is important in covering all people involved. So, just so that everybody understands, we are dealing with external service providers, and there are sometimes some things do fall into the cracks. So we push as hard as we can and not make any mistakes. Karien, next slide.
Shaun, we're going to have to wrap up in a minute. So I think just your concluding comments. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, man.
All right. Okay, well, thanks very much. I mean, it's obviously a broad topic, so the slides are available. I'm sorry we didn't get to cover all of them, but I think the takeaway is that maintenance is really important. It affects people's lifestyles, it affects the values of your properties, and it requires some degree of organization about who's going to be responsible, and it actually starts by inspecting the common property. So somebody walking around looking for those key items, making sure that there's a practical approach to get them serviced and following through. And certainly a managing agent is available to help, but ultimately the trustees are responsible and responsible for approving costs on behalf of the body corporate. Here you see our email addresses, so if anyone has any following questions, by all means, we'll gladly answer those tomorrow or thereafter. So you're more than welcome to be in touch. And Karien, is there one last slide just in terms of our next webinar, which is on Thursday, the 22nd of June. We're going to be addressing the topic of sectional title insurance and some best practices in terms of, getting the best premium, making sure that the body corporate is well covered, what the typical elements of sectional title insurance cover are, and the role of an insurance broker. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We appreciate your attendance, and we look forward to you joining us next time. Hope you have a good evening. Bye now.